Did you know that 85% of products fail to meet market expectations, especially in tech? With the ever evolving customer needs, shifting market trends, and rapid tech advancements, product lifecycle management has become tougher than ever. Today, we will uncover with some of the sharpest minds in the industry how they've tackled these challenges, sharing real life strategies that you can use. So let's dive in.
I'm Jamal. I'm currently a product manager director at Google with over 20 years experience, with past experience at Intel Corporation, at startups and venture capital, and a past career in the military.
Thank you. Devinder?
Hi, I'm Devinder Singh, and I'm an engineering director at Intel. I've been in the software industry for almost 27 years. I have worked at Google, I've worked at Microsoft, I've also had experience with a startup and also Infosys Technologies based out of India. Looking forward to the conversation.
Great. Thank you, guys. Really excited to have you guys over. Okay, let's get started. Jay, we'll start with you. From your perspective, what's the most important factor during the ideation phase in tech? And how do you strike that balance between driving innovation and meeting what the market actually needs?
I'd say there's just one. I think of maybe three factors in my mind thinking about that aspect. One being looking at the competitive landscape, two, looking at the users and thinking a little bit about their experience. And then lastly, there's this creative insight bit that I think about. Let me give you an example how I sort of applied this in action. So one of my current roles I work on is thinking about developer tools and how do we help developers think about UI creation. There's an opportunity where we need to think about how do we evolve the framework in a new direction. And so when looking at this, we look at like what's the marketplace look like? Are there opportunities that exist from competitors, or is there a gap in the market? And then we looked at like, well, what does the customer demand look like? Are customers really looking for something new? In this situation, customers are like, hey, we want something that's sort of more modern, more dynamic. And so there's an opportunity that existed there. But no one knew what that looked like exactly. And that's where the third piece comes into play, that creative insight, where we look at, what's happening in the market, what our users are looking at, and then looking at what is that delta, where we can sort of have that new unique insight to help people match their need and move forward in the industry. And so that's how I kind of use those three different things in action.
Thank you, Jamal. That's a great way to think about it. Devinder, let's talk development. We often see a tug of war between speed to market and making sure the product is top notch. How do you handle that balance, especially when competition is fierce?
Yeah, so product development is all about trade-offs, right? So, and when you're developing features, you want to cater to the customer demand, as just Jamal kind of alluded to, and you want to run fast. But really, you have to run steady and you have to build this MVP, which kind of gives the customers a good glimpse into what product features are going to be useful to them, which allows also for feedback from them. And then you can iterate over the product. Now, on the quality side, the inherent tendency is to maybe run a little bit slower. You say, hey, why should I spend time building the infrastructure, or why should I spend time building the automation early on? Let me get feedback from the customer. So in that case, I'll say, again, run steady and build that infrastructure, right? So the key things to adopt that I would say based on my experiences, kind of adopt the agile methodology that allows you to iterate quick. Automate, automate, automate. That's so important early on to get the infrastructure in place so that when you iterate, you're able to catch any issues which might get introduced because of the iterations. And same on the same lines, have a CI/CD pipeline established. You'll be getting feedback from a bunch of customers. You might have to create multiple branches. So having all this infrastructure is really important. So what I'll say is run steady on the MVP part of it and run steady on the quality part of it to ship an excellent product out there for your customers.
Excellent points, Devinder. Looks like balancing speed and quality is no small feat, but automation and deciding MVP early on might help to a good extent. Okay, let's talk about collaboration across teams. It's a huge part of bringing successful products to market. Devinder, how do you align different departments, especially when each team has its own priorities during launch?
So competing priorities will always exist, and you have to kind of figure out how you work through it. So one of the first things, I try to do is establish clarity in the goals that we have across teams, and also kind of build a roadmap of what is expected from each of our stakeholders and at what time. So let me take the example of a project that I was working on earlier in the year. So we were going to launch a platform where we ran into some last minute issues, which required a task force to be in place. And for the issue to be resolved, we needed to work with the hardware team, the firmware team, the software team, which I was driving, and then the marketing launch team. So one of the first things I did was get a point of contact from each of these teams, sat with them, and established a clear roadmap of how our path was going to look for that quarter to fix the issues before launch. And we outlined the dependencies, we outlined timelines, and we outlined the expectations. We also spent one of the things that I like to do in such scenarios is understand what other competing priorities the other groups might have, and which might kind of offset some of the things that we are doing. So having an understanding, and more importantly, listening to your stakeholders on what their competing priorities are, helps them come together and work on the solution together. So what I'll say is, driving clarity of goals, building a roadmap, and listening to your stakeholders so that you can work together and meet the needs that are there for the product to ship with high quality.
Thank you, Devinder. Excellent example of how you drove alignment amongst different stakeholders. Jamal, in tech, customer expectations shift constantly. How do you make sure your products stay relevant and focused on what customers want throughout the life cycle?
Yeah, good question. I think a key sort of resource to keep in mind is utilizing your UX design and UX research aspect. Many times it's a little bit easier to modify the design and look and feel ahead of engineering, so you don't spend time writing lots of extra code. So I'll give you an example of this. So one of my current projects I'm working now is around a lot about AI. And AI, as you can imagine, is always evolving. The things we thought about a year ago are completely different than what we're thinking about the next 2 weeks. And so when we first thought about how do we apply AI to help developers be more productive, we first thought about, hey, let's talk with the developers and do some key research. And that helped the foundation of creating the first set of the roadmap we're working on. However, we realized that we need to kind of constantly evolve that project. So throughout the process, we said, well, let's do more research along the way to adjust things based on what the competition is doing, what users are looking for. And so that along the way, we're evolving so that even when we launched initial milestones, we haven't sort of just launched something that we thought about 6 months ago. We're thinking that's dynamic and meet the needs of users based on sort of grounded research that's based on great user experience, based on having that sort of collaboration between product research and engineering.
Great insight, Jamal. It's all about staying customer focused. Let's jump into one of the most exciting and sometimes challenging phases of product lifecycle management. That's the launch strategy. Having been part of launches, I'll jump in here for a moment. I know firsthand how important it is to align market timing or launch timing, market readiness, and customer needs. In one of my previous launches, we initially targeted a specific group of customers, but then a new security feature we developed caught a hyperscaler's attention, and this opened up a whole new profitable segment for us. It's one of those examples where the product's potential can grow beyond what you had initially planned. Jamal, from your perspective in the ideation phase, how do you make sure that your team sets up the groundwork for a successful launch?
Yeah, I think the key thing about good launch is having two things clear defined. What is the business goals and what are the metrics you're going to use to measure that along the way? I think once you go past that initial ideation and getting the launch, you kind of sometimes can lose focus on like what's the most important driver and what we're driving towards. And having clarity at the very beginning allows us to kind of go back to that in multiple situations. So let me give you an example. So in a past career, I was working on how do we help developers create Android apps on the Intel platform. And one of the solutions we needed for that is an Android emulator. And there's lots of things that can do with emulation. You can test out graphics and UI, a lot of different things that are around there. But we had a clear goal about having a certain adoption number. And so as we added features and functionality along the way, we always went back to like, is this leading towards the growth or is this a cool new idea? So we ended up launching the product that were very based on on these goals, but we ended up, working on these other ideas that came up along the way, but we made sure that we were first delivering on our business objectives and key measures so that we would have clear value that was created for our users and not just have scope creep along the way of new things we evolved and discovered in the development process.
Thank you, Jamal. Looks like the early groundwork really does play a key role in launch success. Devinder, with your background in development, how do you think product quality affects whether product is truly ready for the market?
So quality is absolutely key before you ship the product to the customer. And at a very, very high level, the customer is looking for reliability, a consistent experience, and consistent performance also in terms of response time, in terms of database queries, how long it takes, and so on, right? Jamal kind of talked about in one of his first answers was the whole UX story. So that I'll tie to more reliability part, right? The user wants to have a reliable experience as they go through different maybe paths to get to the same thing, reliable in terms of the browser holding up and not crashing or anything. So having reliability is very important. The consistent part. Today we work off of many devices, for example. So a user is expecting consistent performance. As a development team, you might say, oh, it's phone form factor. Your user will not care for it, but they do. So consistency is really important, and that also adds to the quality part of it. Now, Jamal talked about the KPI piece, and that's absolutely critical on the performance side. Adhering to the KPIs that we set in terms of what I alluded to before, which was like the response time, could be a database query or something like that, being consistent. And then also applying it correctly. So I'll just give one anecdotal kind of incident that happened is in our development team, we could check in a feature as long as the performance did not degrade by 5%. But what happened is each developer was taking advantage of that 5%, and within a matter of months, the product's performance had dropped significantly. So what I'm trying to say is you also have to have KPIs which do not upset the quality of the product, right? So keeping quality in mind is key for a great customer experience, and that's what every dev should be doing out there.
Exactly, Devinder. Quality can make or break a launch. Well, in today's discussion, we learned how product lifecycle management is so much more than just taking a product from idea to market. It is about being flexible or adaptable, working together across teams, and keeping the customer front and center. Each phase has its own challenges and opportunities, and the key to success is being open to new ideas and quick changes. Thank you to our panelists for sharing their insights, and thank you to you all for watching the video. Please let us know your questions or comments in the comment section below. Thank you.